Speaking this evening, Tom Mitchell. A lot of you may recognise him as a player because he was at Worth School. Do you play for Sussex Schools?
Yeah.
Sussex Schools, England students, Oxford University, and England 7's player.
And East Grinstead Minis.
And East Grinstead Minis, Bill. Is he one of yours? Is he one of yours?
He was one of those. I wasn't the coach, I was only the team manager.
When we were at the Borough, we were just looking at the list of Sussex young players who are hitting Premiership and in the same sort of format you're playing. And Lawsbury, Marler, Turner Hall, Chisholm, 12 Trees, Charlie Matthews and Dylan Hartley. So these are Sussex youngsters who've got to Premiership level. And Tom, England 7's player, professional player. We'd like you to welcome you this evening.
Yeah. You've just he's read out a list of names that you're obviously scraping the bottom of the barrel if you ended up with me. Thanks very much for inviting me down here, Phil. It's really good to come back to where I started. I actually dug out a picture that I managed to find. I don't know if you'll be able to spot me there, but...
Well, just give me a minute.
Yeah, that's where it started. Started playing under 8s, I think it was. Down here, and then I had to make, actually, this is probably not a confession I should start with, but I think when I started at Worth, I had to make the decision of whether I'd play rugby or football on a Sunday, because we had matches on a Saturday for school, and I actually chose football. So yeah, well, fortunately it didn't. Fortunately it didn't ruin the rest of my life, and luckily I got to continue playing some rugby. Yeah, I'll just introduce sort of a bit of my history and what I'm doing now. So I came through playing at Worth after I stopped playing for East Grinstead, and from there I did represent the county briefly, and then the only men's rugby I ever played before England 7's was for a team out in Australia on my gap year, which was a fairly social scene rather than any great sort of rugby. But from there, then I went to Bristol University, played for their first team, and that's where I got invited to play for England students, which was a real big stepping stone for me, because it was the first time I'd been part of an England team, and also a sort of professional environment, which is what they try and create with that. And then I had a postgraduate year at Oxford, and was fortunate enough to play in the varsity game, which was an amazing experience, and a good stage, and partly contributed to me then being invited to join the 7's squad. My initial call up to the 7's squad actually was it's a big surprise. It was Easter of my final year while I was at Bristol, and just got a phone call during the holidays which I missed, and Ben Ryan left a voicemail for me. And I sort of listened to it, and I thought, nah, Ben Ryan's probably not going to be leaving me voicemails, it's some sort of wind up or something. I listened to it a couple more times, and I thought, no, this sounds like it might be genuine. So I promptly gave him a call back, and he invited me down to the training, which was a nerve-wracking experience, but it was great because this is when Ben Gollings was one of his last training sessions, probably before he left the squad. So that was a huge name to be training with. And then from there I played in the SussexSRFUR tournaments, which is like a European series. So I'll go on to talk a bit about the IRB series, but the SussexSRFUR, which is a 3-part series, was a really good introduction for sort of new players, and that's where I started. And then there was a bit of a break while I was at Oxford before I then got a call up to train with the squad for the IRB tournaments. So I went from sort of that to that, which I got a lot more ugly, apart from anything else. So for those of you who don't know how the IRB series works in the season, this year those were the venues. There is actually a mistake on here that hasn't been updated, because we were due to have our first tournament of the season in La Plata in Argentina, and about a month out from the tournament they said that they weren't ready to host it, and it got canned. And I think they've promised that it'll be ready next year, so it'll be interesting to see whether or not it's added. But yeah, so this year there's 9, as was last year, there are 9 tournaments, and takes you sort of far and wide, which is pros and cons, but at the moment it's a real plus point to what we're doing. And you're exposed to a huge number of different sorts of people, different crowds, different venues. So in terms of my playing development, it's been amazing. My first tournament was Wellington last year, and we were not the most popular team there, I can assure you. So warming up in front of some screaming Kiwis, shouting all sorts, was it took a bit of overcoming initially, but I mean, it got easier from there. I mean, that was a sort of baptism of fire in a lot of ways, but a fantastic experience, and one I was hoping to replicate this year. But for those of you who don't know, I broke my leg in Dubai 6 weeks ago, so I'm unlikely to be fit for Wellington. But so just a bit about where 7's is at the moment. Obviously I don't know how much everyone knows about the history of it all, but only in the last couple of years has it been a full-time sport for rugby players. Before that, it was largely a development tool. Players were brought in at random, essentially, from Premiership clubs, either as development or to bolster the squad. Ben was going around to clubs trying to get whoever he could to make up the numbers. And it means that there were some huge names that have played 7's. Tom Van Dale, Dave Stretzel, both big names, and they did really well in it. But now we've got a squad of 19 players, and everyone's full-time. So they don't play any 15s unless, I mean, there might be this scenario where someone was told they're not going to be involved in the IRB series for a few tournaments and they needed some game time, whatever it might be, but that's quite rare. And at the moment, everyone is just training for 7's. And it's been, I mean, it's had good results for the last 2 years, slightly different so far this year, because we're currently sitting at 13th position in the World Series, which is a long way down where we aim to be, considering we finished 3rd for the last 2 years. So hopefully, and there's still 6 tournaments left this season, hopefully we'll be able to turn it around. But, I mean, that aside, the Premiership, the full-time programme seems to be successful, because obviously it means that you can focus 100% on the 7's. Just a bit about how it feels to actually do this as your season. Essentially, you've got 9 tournaments, and that's the only time you're competing. So you're not turning out each weekend to play and have a competitive game. So in a way, it puts a lot of pressure on each tournament. You're turning up, and if you don't perform on those 2 days or 3 days, whatever it is, then you find yourself struggling, as we are now, because a couple of times we just haven't turned up and performed when we needed to. But you end up, I mean, you travel over 80,000 miles over the course of the year, some of which you get to stock up air miles and spend on holiday in the summer. I mean, the next trip, the boys will be flying from Heathrow out to Wellington. They'll spend 2 weeks there, and then after Wellington, the very next day, so you know, they'll be carrying injuries, they'll be battered, bruised, dehydrated, and they'll be on a plane to Las Vegas. And I can tell you that's a pretty serious journey. And that's another advantage of this full-time program that we've got now. We're able to kind of blood players into that travelling, because there's a lot of players who, a lot of Premiership players who would struggle with that aspect of it. Especially the bigger guys, the tall guys. I mean, we travel economy as well. We're not reclining in business. So the taller guys, I mean, obviously not speaking from experience, but the bigger guys assure me that when they turn up after these sort of 14-hour flights, they're really struggling and they're very stiff, and it has an effect on performance sometimes. And that's one of the things that we've got to try and combat in our preparation. So I'll talk briefly about how it works, how our training works, but it's slightly different to Premiership clubs in that they will go in the morning, 8 o'clock, whatever, and they'll run through with training till perhaps 2, 3 in the afternoon, and they'll do that every day of the week and have their matches on Saturday, obviously. And what we do, we have our 3-day camp from Monday to Wednesday, and we stay up in a hotel in the Lensbury in Teddington, which is just round the corner from Twickenham. So we do that every week because we've actually got players who live in Sheffield, Hull, and then some from down south, some from around London, some from Bristol, coming from all around the country. And that's a kind of hangover from when it was the old system, when they just used to bring players in from Premiership clubs. And I suspect, and I don't really have this on good authority, but I suspect it's moving towards more of a Premiership system where we will all be asked to be based in London, and we'll travel in every day for training. Our training largely consists of a lot of running. It sounds simple, but essentially that's the emphasis of a lot of the training that we do, because that's what prepares you for the tournaments. And we'll have 6-7 kilometre sessions in an hour, which I don't know how to, it's quite hard to quantify, but it's quite a lot of running to do, to be honest, and most of that's done in sprints as well. And we'll do, alongside that, we'll do our weights, which again, there's a slightly different focus to 15s, in that there's a lot of emphasis on speed and power, and less of an emphasis on kind of bulking. I mean, for me, if I went to a Premiership club tomorrow, the first thing they'd probably do is get me on a hypertrophy program, tell me to eat a lot of food, and try and put on about 5 kilos, I would imagine, or more. Because there's a different sort of emphasis, a lot more impacts in 15s, and a lot less running. You can get away without being so quick and sharp. And so personally, I think that the 7's environment breeds better all-round athletes in that respect. Obviously, there are a lot of rugby players, thinking front rows, who probably disagree with me. But in terms of being able to run, being strong, being able to run for a long time and being fast, I mean, to have all those attributes is something that is essential in 7's, and perhaps slightly more rare in the 15s game. We also periodically, as all professionals do, have our testing, and this is quite a good way of illustrating the difference between 7's and 15s. The fitness test that we do, which is the RFU fitness test, I don't know how many of you have run that with players or anything, but essentially what it involves is being down on your chest, going around poles, and the 7's test is essentially the 15's backs test, the England backs test. We do that back to back with a 2-minute rest in between, and we have to do it in a quicker average than their one set time. I don't know if that made sense to you, but essentially we have to do what they do twice with a 2-minute rest. So yeah, and it's pretty tough. I've done it twice now. First time I did it, I've never felt like that. It took me a good half an hour to realise where I was, to be able to talk to anyone. And we actually went from that fitness test into a 20-minute training session, a skills session. I was just trying to keep my head down, just trying to get through it. I'm not sure I should be making these sorts of confessions. Yeah, confessions. I mean, if any of you think of trying it, I'll think again. It's not. Maybe they should bring it in for referees.
Does that mean 7's players are fitter than 15 players generally?
Yeah, in that type of fitness. I mean, we'll be able to run for a lot longer. We'll be able to do more repeat speeds. So if you're comparing the quickest players from 15s and 7s, I mean, we'll take Dan Norton, for example, who's probably the most famous England 7s player at the moment, because he's quick. And then, I don't know, Chris Ashton, perhaps. I think top speed, there's probably not much between them, but you ask them to do that speed again and again, and I think Dan will start to really show the difference there, because you have to sprint in defence and in attack a lot more regularly in 7s than you do have to in 15s. Yeah, just if there's any questions as I'm going about things that perhaps you want to just explain a bit more, then feel free to ask, but I imagine at the end we can have a proper question and answer, so it's up to you. I don't know if this is going to work. Just click this, sorry. Blame Phil's laptop. At this point, actually, just while I'm here, I'll just show, it's a little video we've got. It's just, it kind of shows the behind the scenes, and there's a few clips as well. It's just a little 5-minute video that we show every now and again, and it's from the last 2 years, so I don't feature that much, which is the only problem with it. Kirsten, when you said we conquered the technology, you're really confident. Here we go.
Hey.
Is there any sound?
Yeah, it's turned off for some reason.
That's the fitness test, though.
I know you're well prepared. Put aside all your fears. Jah will answer all your prayers. Might seem that no one cares. Been working hard for years. Keep climbing up the stairs. Gotta know that you are already there. Blood, sweat, and the tears now. None of them can take your shares now. Enemies better be your man now. Champions got a lot to bear now. I'm out telling this, I'm out swear now. I am the tiger, got the stare now. Carry on until we see the sun. We're holding on. Hold on to the dream. Hold on. Hold on now, now. Hold on and believe. Though we already won, we still hold on. Hold on. Hold on now, now. We still hold on. Hold on. Hold on now, now. Hold on to the dream. The road is long, we still hold on. We carry on, we still stay strong. Today is long, but tomorrow will come. Hold on now. Gotta focus now with the strongest grip. All the thoughts in the morning sleep. Pain and trouble and trial and grief. But you must sow, 'cause you must worry. All time never will get you beat, and you never will get defeated. Come your hold on strong, concrete. Do the work, God talk is cheap. Hold on to the dream. Hold on.
Just captivated his younger. Then Dundalk. Norton's got pace. From the outside, can he bring it round? They need the conversion. Dundalk with the try, yes he has.
Trailing 1-2. Morton, ball in the end. Lovely skipper is Ian Morton. He's got all the moves inside the outside.
Hold on to the dream. Hold on now, now. Hold on and
it's actually quite interesting to know how many of those players playing there you sort of recognise, because obviously the building profile of 7's will continue to build, but it's not nearly as big as 15, particularly if you're not involved in the coaching of it. And, so it'd be interesting to see the difference between that sort of your views now and then perhaps in the next couple of years or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to gauge that actually as a player at the moment. It's kind of what level of exposure we've got and to what extent we're actually getting out to the wider kind of rugby community.
Profile's rising all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean it is, and certainly now, I'll talk a bit about it later, but now it's an Olympic sport. That's bringing more sort of kudos to it and more popularity to it.
That's going to be great for Britain, isn't it? I mean,
Well, yeah. I mean, that's probably something that I'll talk about at the end. But, just something I wanted to talk about that a lot of people probably don't realise from watching is the amount of technology that goes into the game these days, and especially 7's. I think in the last couple of years it's really been at the forefront of bringing in new technologies to the game. You probably noticed now a lot of 15 sides, they're wearing the GPS in the back of their shirts here, and that's a thing that started with 7's that we continue to use. And essentially what it does is it means you can track your speeds, the distances you're running, literally where you've run on the pitch, and all sorts of stuff like that. And now, it used to be that we could only analyse it post-game, but now we can actually do it live in a game. So, and we do it for warm-ups. So we're a heart rate monitor and a GPS, so they know what speed you're up to, what your heart rate's up to. So they know perhaps before you do when you're physically ready to go. And this is the sleep analysis. This is something that we've actually we've started today. I've got a new watch that we got given today. We were given these. Very stylish number, isn't it? And we're actually wearing these for the next 5 weeks or so. And it's our new physio, Remy, is drawing up a study on the effects of sleep and sleep pattern. And amazingly, it's never been done before. It's a company called Restwise who are funding it. And so basically this tracks our movement all day. A similar sort of technology, I think, have you seen the Nike fuel bands? I'm not plugging, I got a free one off them, but I'm not plugging. They essentially track your movement. And these know when you're asleep and when you're awake and what you're doing. So we'll see how the results come out for that one.
Are you supposed to get so many hours sleep a day? Is that part of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, they recommend the same as anyone, really. I mean, around 8 hours. I mean, if you're doing strenuous exercise, 8 to 10 hours. So if you go out on Saturday night, this knows. And they will know.
You put on the cat or something.
Dad might be wearing this.
What's he sleeping?
And also what we've brought in this year is an iPad app. It might be hard for you to see from here. I won't be able to get into it, I'm sure, because I'm not logged onto the internet. But essentially we have an app on the iPad, which we've all got now. And we use every morning when we wake up, we have to input it's called a well-being form, so how well we slept, how we're feeling, how sore we are from yesterday's session, all that sort of stuff. It'll also have schedules on here, any team documents that we want. Gym sessions are going to be put on here. We can also enter notes for our gym sessions and for our well-being, so that the physio can then see how we're doing, which is really important so that they can keep tabs on us, particularly when we're only together for 3 days a week. Obviously when we're away it's a little less important because we're all together, but when players are away from staff for 4 days a week, you need to know that they're doing the right things, that they're feeling good. So that's that's a new thing, and the 15's guys are going to start using it as well, and hopefully it'll be really helpful. Yeah, these, I'll get one of these out to show you. These, because we do a lot of travelling, this is something we've started using this year. It's called a humidifier, and you can imagine the looks we get when we start bringing these down in the middle of the aeroplane. But A few concerned looks. But essentially what you do is you wear it over your mouth, and it's supposed to, it works from experience, it limits the effects of jet lag because you don't get as dehydrated, because it keeps the moisture in here rather than, and also obviously any kind of illnesses and stuff are less likely to be picked up. And that's a big worry when we're travelling so much, is picking up illnesses on planes, and when you run down, you're getting dehydrated. So yeah, I won't model it for you, but that's that. Medical treatments, this is something I know quite a lot about of late. So as Dad will tell you, I was sitting at home for 4 weeks over Christmas, and I was in the armchair, and round me I just had half the medical room. So what we've got is various machines that do various different things that you were quite baffled by, weren't you?
I was, yeah, technology.
So we've got machines called game readies, which you may or may not use, which are basically for icing joints, which is, you know, people have been icing things for injuries for years, but this kind of makes it easy and is a lot more efficient because you basically plug a hose and strap it around your whatever joint it is you're icing, and you put on various programs that compress it and ice it. We've also got ultrasound machines that we have access to stimulate bone and tissue growth. We use complexes quite frequently, which is just an electrical pulse to build muscle. This is all as new to me a few weeks ago as it might be to some of you now. But it's amazing what a difference access to this sort of stuff makes. And I've certainly benefited from it so far, so well, for sure. Another thing that this year that has been new to the squad is the analysis that we do. We've taken on a full-time analyst, and it's his job to cut games, pick out various aspects of games for us to look at as individuals and as a team. So you can imagine how important this is in the middle of a tournament. If you've got opposition that you find you're drawn against, Australia say in the quarterfinals, you want to know as much about them as possible. Know how to break them down and where their weaknesses are. And this is the type of stuff, I don't know if you can all see it from back there, but this is the type of stuff that we get told. So for example, you know, they've got 73% tackle completion. You know, that's not the highest, so you might try and be a bit more direct with them, for example, knowing that you can break tackles. Stuff like knowing who's going into the breakdowns. If they're half-backs who are going into a lot of breakdowns, then that means you can target them, because they're usually the smaller, more vulnerable players. Stuff like that, and it's amazing how useful this is, particularly off set piece, so kick-offs and line-outs, really is utilised a lot these days. And on the sort of away from tournament, when we're training, we video every training session. So we watch that back after every session. We can also slow things down. We've got the super slow-mo camera for individual skills as well. So I used to kick, I don't know why I stopped kicking, I obviously wasn't doing very well, but the 90s we did get video with the slow-mo camera. We also went to a lab at St Mary's and did a sort of analysis thing where they put sensors on us, built up our profile when we were kicking, so they know they can work out all the different forces and different joints and muscles, work out where your imbalances are, and all this sort of stuff is you never really think of when you're out doing kicking practice, but it can probably make a difference. You know, when you're wondering why you're missing left, right by inches, it's sometimes these little things. And this, talking about the things that we do when we're away from tournament, this is actually something that's kind of in addition to the rugby. Because in the 7's environment, we spend large amounts of very intense time together. So even on our training week, it's very intense Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because we stay in a hotel together. We're basically together from 7:30 till in the morning till 9 at night, essentially. So there's a lot more pressure on relationships, on getting on, which is something you don't always kind of think about when you're watching the games on TV, perhaps. And this is something we've done a lot of this year. It's Insights. It's called Insights. It's basically personality profiling and analysis. And I think they use it in business and in office sort of environments as well. But essentially you answer a load of questions and it tells you what type of person you are. Right? And it's remarkably accurate. And it gives you a whole booklet on the ways that are best to communicate with you, ways that you communicate with others best. And it's the kind of thing initially you're thinking, well, I'll probably know all this. You know, I don't need some sort of computer algorithm to work this stuff out for me, but you find yourself reading it and thinking, oh, actually, yeah, maybe you've got a point. And very loosely, it puts people in 4 categories. You're a blue, a red, a yellow, or a green. The blues tend to be sort of quite straight down the line, like to be very organised. The reds, without trying to sound negative, basically the angry, more direct ones, would say. The yellows are the sort of fruitcakes. The yellows are sort of like to have fun, and yeah, the greens are a bit more reflective and perhaps a bit more sensitive. Anyway, I ended up, these are my scores here, so it gives you a conscious and a subconscious. So mine are close together. Some people's conscious and subconscious are more spread out, but it's just an interesting thing I thought not many people are aware of, that kind of thing that we do. Because on and off the pitch, if you're having people falling out or not able to communicate effectively with one another, then it can have a really detrimental effect by the time it comes to game time. And that sort of stuff leads to what we've got here, which is something we've come up very recently. I don't want to say in the face of a crisis, but essentially we're not where we want to be as a team, as a squad. And this is something that we thought we'd probably overlooked. It's kind of a vision, what we've got as a 7's team. At the top it says to create a world-class performance environment that delivers winning people and winning performances. And winning is used there in a broader sense than obviously just the result of the game. And so we've come up with some points, and we did this as a team, as a group. And hopefully it will help us to turn things around in the coming tournaments. Now, I don't know whether, because I've got a few points that might want to, I don't know if people want to throw out questions at this point, or the best way, however you want to do it. But I mean, seeing as we've already had the Olympics raised, I'll say a bit about that. In the summer, after London finished, there's a huge hype about it, so there's a lot of interviews going on about it, and the press came in to talk to us about it. And they said, oh, are you excited that it's an Olympic sport? I sort of, most people's answer was, well, yes, but it's 4 years away. We've got a lot of work to do before then, and we might not even be, involved in it in any way, shape or form. So it's a bit difficult to talk about it now, but I mean, from a personal point of view, that's as far as I've looked in terms of a goal for my rugby career, because, I mean, a year ago I didn't expect to be in this position, let alone planning 5 years ahead. So what I'm hoping will be the case is that they renew my contract when it expires next year, and then I get another 4 years with the 7's and have an opportunity to play for Great Britain in the Olympics. That would be the dream. But as I say, at the moment we don't know how the GB team is going to work out. As far as I understand it, we have to pick between us, I'm not sure how this is going to work, but between us, England, Scotland and Wales, one of us will be the qualification team. Because they're not allowing us to play as a GB squad in any of the World Series up to the Olympics. So whereas New Zealand will just have their team running straight from the IRB into the Olympics, we're not going to have that luxury. So in terms of qualification, I hope England will be the qualification team, in which case if we finish in the top 3 or 4, I think it is, of the series, then we'll qualify for the Olympics. But at this rate, it won't be England the qualifying team, but that's yet to be decided. And then from there, they'll appoint a coach, select players that they think are the best players for the job. I mean, looking at potential difficulties with that, it means you're not together as a squad for very long before the Olympics, which doesn't bode well, to be honest. But we've got a really good pool of players to choose from. So there's no reason why we shouldn't medal at the Olympics, whoever goes.
Can I just ask a question on that? Do
Yeah,
you think they might draw on some of the Premiership experience?
Yeah, this is another question we got asked a lot, because the press thought it would be a juicy one to ask us. We said, well,
Why did you ask?
yeah. Because there were also a few of the 15s boys kind of fueled that inadvertently, I think, by saying, oh, I'd like to play in the Olympics. And there's a big nut. Ben Foden said it, I think. Ashton said it. Alex Good said it as well. I mean, who wouldn't? That's the thing. We sort of weren't offended really that they were saying this, because everyone wants to play for their country in the Olympics, don't they? But it was actually quite nice that Ben came out at the time and said, well, hang on a minute, because a lot of these players are expecting to be able to just come straight over and be able to do it. So that's your first difficulty, is that actually they might not be as good at 7's as they thought they were, because it's a very different game to...
People would be fit enough.
Well, there's a fitness issue, and players think that they, give it a couple of months, a few fitness tests, they'll get there, but stuff like the travelling takes getting used to. The running loads are a lot more than they'll be used to, so you might find that actually after 2 months of 7's training, they're breaking down, having injuries that they're not used to. There's also it's a much more technical game than it used to be, and perhaps what they've been used to playing in Premiership 7's or Middlesex 7's. It's a very different game to what they might have played before. So there's a kind of technical and tactical aspect to it that they might struggle to get to speed with. There's also other incentives for them to stay in 15s. I mean, clubs are not really going to want to release players for this necessarily. Bearing in mind that these players will come back in very different shape to what they were, when they left. There's also the difficulty that I think there's Lions tour the following year. Is that right? And the World Cup is a complication as well, because it means that the earliest they'll be able to come into a 7's programme would be after the World Cup, which doesn't give you a huge amount of time, basically. So there are all these difficulties with 15 players, but then if they want to make the choice, I think the thing is, if they want to make the choice, they have to make that sooner rather than later, essentially. But well, hopefully they're there.
Tom, how about the referees? You say it's a highly technical game. What links do you have with them? Do they come and join in at all? Or?
Yeah, so the referees, it's the same referees for all of the IRB tournaments, bar a couple. I think they must have sort of a kind of invitational referee for a couple of tournaments.
Yeah.
So are they pros as well? Are they professionals?
Yeah. They at the moment though, they're professional referees, but they're not full-time 7's referees, I don't think.
No, they won't be.
Because it's not at that stage yet. I mean, as I say, there's only 9 tournaments. So in terms of, I don't know. I think the other referees, the English referees who do the IRB circuit, I think they referee Championship. I'm not sure. Yeah, Luke. Yeah. But it's in a way, it's a. I mean. Have many of you refereed 7's in the past?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know what your view is, but a lot of the referees at the IRB circuit say it poses different challenges. I mean, the breakdown, for example, there are fewer players in there. There's usually just 2 or 3 players in the breakdown, which you might think makes it more simple, but actually the margins are much finer and it's a lot quicker. And because of the space that's available in 7's, small decisions like at the breakdown can make a huge difference. I mean, if you get given penalties, a massive quick tap penalties often result in tries. So if you're making the wrong call at the breakdown, the repercussions are often massive. So there are different sort of pressures for referees, and also physically they've got to be able to keep up. I think the South African referee Rasta, he's as quick as some of the wingers on the circuit, which is quite impressive. I don't think he'd stand up to the physicality because he's quite a small guy, Yeah, sorry.
Yes, I mean, a couple of things, Tom, they've almost come together now, what you were saying. First of all, at the breakdown, in your training sessions, how much emphasis do you put on exactly what the tackler and his mates, call them the assistant tacklers, are allowed to do? I imagine that is really drummed in, especially by the end of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point for our style of play because we don't, our aim is to actually have as few breakdowns as possible because physically we're not as big as some other teams, we're a lot quicker and we've got more skillful ball players. So actually one of our attacking philosophies is only have breakdowns if they're essential. But obviously if there's a breakdown you need to know what you're going to do, and obviously in defence there's going to be breakdowns on their terms. So yeah, we have technical sessions on that where we'll spend half an hour working threes, and the main emphasis is on the second man decision, particularly in defence. So our go-to is first man tackles low, chops and rolls away, and the second man in makes the decision as to whether he's going to attack the breakdown or not. Yeah, and the other thing that's different to the 15's game is the air that you have to show as the second man. You have to be a lot more clear with that than you see. You seem to be able to get away with quite a lot in 15's compared to 7's.
Clear release.
Yeah.
And the other thing, which is linked to that, I mean, you're an analyst who analyses yourselves and your opponents. Does he also analyse the referees, or are they just too unpredictable?
No, that's a good point. Oh no, we spent a good 20 minutes slagging them off. No, that's a very good point. We actually, because obviously referees have traits, and because we're getting the same referees each tournament, you can pick up on those traits. For instance, there are some referees who never penalise New Zealand. Yeah, I mean, you can pick up on stuff, and it's something that we've benefited from in the past, and also something we probably haven't done enough of in the past as well. But yeah, that's a very good point.
So there are 9 tournaments at the moment. I was speaking to somebody not long ago who's part of a group of people who are trying to set up a tournament in Geneva. And how many tournaments can the game take, given the demands of how you play and the intensity of it and recovery time?
It's an interesting question, yeah. I'm not sure, and I suspect they'll probably keep adding tournaments until it does become too much, because it is hard to know. I mean, I can't imagine playing too many more than there is at the moment, because you really, when you get back from a tournament, to maintain your physical shape, you need those 3 weeks to recover and actually get training in again. Because I think if you start adding more tournaments, it might actually be detrimental to the game, because it might slow down, you have a lot more injuries, lose the best players, that sort of thing. But they are adding tournaments all the time, and we've got an extra one in, so the end of this season finishes in May with the London 7's, and then after that there's a couple of weeks off, and then there's the FIRA tournament, and then we're straight into the World Cup next year in Moscow. So that's an extra thing anyway. But then England are also taking a team to LA for an invitational tournament, which no one objected to at the time. But essentially, I mean, I don't know what the thinking is behind it, because there's not really any kudos for winning it. You get $1 million if you win it, which is probably the drive. We need to make up our deficit. But there are loads of invitational tournaments now who are throwing a lot of money at it. Last year, a few of the boys were kind of hired into various mercenary teams, and they went out to Sri Lanka for a tournament. So they played 2 tournaments in 10 days out there, and they all got paid however much each. And they were released by the RFU to do that. So it'd be interesting to see whether that happens more and more. I mean, you might get people who actually think, well, I could probably make more money just doing these invitational tournaments. I don't know, it's not at that stage yet, but there's a chance that can happen, because if you look, I mean, if a rugby player is thinking purely about his kind of welfare outside of it and the amount of money he can make, he's not going to really want to play 7's, because there's still quite a big gap between the top level players in the Premiership and the top level players in 7's. I suspect that'll get made up over the next couple of years, naturally, but at the moment it's not. I hope so.
Tom, what do you make of kind of emerging countries coming through? I mean, that's the one thing that grabs me about 7's is the fact Portugal are doing really well, and Kenya do really. Do you go into tournaments you just don't even know, you've no idea what the opposition they're going to present?
Well, you have an idea. I mean, those lot of teams have got very distinctive styles. So from that extent, you know what they're going to give. But they, in the past, have had very changeable performances.
Yeah.
But they are great examples of countries that have benefited from a full-time programme. Portugal are now full-time and they're reaping the benefits. I mean, they've been doing really well. Because you don't have to, perhaps because you don't have to develop a large group of players. I mean, if you've got 12 good players and you stay relatively injury-free, you're going to succeed in tournaments. Kenya are doing really well because they've actually utilised their strengths. They started. Well, and they've got. I'm not allowed to comment on Mike Friday. For various reasons. But I don't think it's any secret that him and Ben have had fallen out in the past. But he's. I mean, Mike's doing a great job at Kenya because he's drilled into them what they need to know and hasn't overloaded them with stuff that they don't. That's not their natural style of play. Really.
Somehow feel they don't have any of this, really.
Sorry?
Somehow feel they don't go in for quite as much of this.
Well, yeah. I mean, perhaps there's a bit of that, and I don't know a lot about the Kenyan programme, but I can't imagine it's as sophisticated as what we do. But then they're in the top 5, I think, at the moment, and we're down the bottom. So it shows you at the end of the day, unless you put all this to good use and turn up for whatever it is. I mean, we've had 6 days of rugby, 4 of which we've not done very well, and that's why we're potentially ruined the whole season. So, and that's the reality of the series. So.
Didn't things start going wrong when you got injured?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I keep telling them anyway.
Tom, it seems to me that one of the most important things for 7's is publicity, the communication to the rugby world via television. I presume you have to know Starmer Smith pretty well.
Yeah.
He is the nicest guy on earth, lovely man, terribly well-meaning guy, but he lost his job as a commentator on 15-a-side because he's not a good commentator, and he's just as bad on 7's because he doesn't understand rugby. He doesn't enlighten the world as to what's going on the field.
Yeah.
I think he's not good news for 7's. Well, he's old school. He is the nicest guy you've ever met, but he's not good at communicating the game to people who need new people coming into the game, viewing it. Wouldn't be helped at all to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry.
And I just fear that unless the RFU get a grip of that side of things as well, and lean on the communication people, the TV people. At the end of the day, it's TV that's going to bring money into the game, and it's not helping.
That's interesting. I've not really. So I mean, I watched him. I hadn't really thought from that point of view before. But I mean, I really like Nigel. He's a really nice man.
He really is a really nice man.
But I can understand. Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. He's quite old school. I mean, he often, also, which really annoys the players, he always gets players' names wrong. It's not an important thing necessarily, but it is annoying.
It is for a commentator, really.
Well,
trying to introduce. This is. What's he called again? That was his mate. He played last week. Hang on a minute.
You'd think it would be kind of
I mean, it is important that they understand the game. Rugby to a new viewer, it's quite difficult to understand. Nigel does not understand it. That's why he got 5 in the 15-a-side commentary. And he got this job, full marks to him for getting himself into the 7's, but it is holding you back in terms of enlightening the world about the game.
Yeah, I can see that, but I think he's firmly entrenched in his spot at the moment, just because he's been there around, and I mean, if I think when I was watching Sevens when I was younger, he was the voice I sort of associate with it, but I can see your point, yeah. I mean, the television stats are remarkable. I don't have them to hand, but the exposure that we get globally is huge, and in terms of the number of TVs that we'll be on, it's bigger than the Premiership and also some internationals, just because of the global appeal. And yeah, you're right, you do have to tap into that. And at the moment, this is one of the shortfalls in the RFU at the moment. We're running around out there without a shirt sponsor on us, which I think we're the only team that are doing that because they're holding out for more money. And they've got a point that they can hold out for more money because we are being shown to that many people. But yeah, no, it's an interesting point. I think the biggest, or the most important way of exposing Sevens to a wider audience is actually by educating them about the benefits of it for development purposes. I mean, a lot of young people, I'm thinking sort of, under 8s, under 9s, I think it's a great way of getting kids into rugby because there's probably less of the stuff that maybe you don't want to do and more of the stuff you do want to do, very simply. You get to run around a whole lot, there's a lot of space, there's a lot more scoring, which everyone loves. You don't have, I mean, I am biased, but you don't have the big collisions that might put some people off, particularly at the lower levels. I think it would be a really good development tool and something that should be brought in. It'd be great if it was brought in as more of a clubs, as more of a kind of, well, it's more of a game in its own right rather than as a kind of part-time thing. But it takes time to do that, and it takes us players and coaches to kind of get out there and actually spread it around a bit.
What do you make of this American guy that's come in as top 40 sprinters? I mean, two things about that. One, it's round on YouTube, isn't it? So it's viral, it's just going everywhere. And two, it kind of like, wow, if we're attracting top level athletes into Sevens, not rugby players coming through, that shifts the dimension completely.
Yeah, well, for those of you who haven't seen the YouTube video, and I've been asked about this a lot recently. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's had, I think, over 1 million views now. This video, this new American winger is very quick. I think most of his tries he's got in a video against quite slow guys, but he is undoubtedly incredibly quick and an incredibly good athlete because he was in the US sprint team. Now he missed out on the Olympics, so I thought, well, I want to be in Rio, so I'm going to try my hand at Sevens. And he didn't just approach it. I think, much like we have, the US team have got a system whereby they will go out to other sports and kind of recruit. We do it through UK sport, people like that, talent ID sort of things, where if you've got particular physical attributes or set of skills, basketball players, for example, then they'll perhaps take you through a number of tests and a development path if you're interested to actually get you up to speed and to see if you could make it. But he's phenomenal to watch. People like to see real speed and exciting things like that. And I'm sure that happens more and more. I mean, particularly in the States when they've got a huge history of track sprinters anyway, and a lot of whom will fail to make the Olympic team, and they'll think about other routes to it. So they'll look at Sevens. I'm not sure it'll happen so much here because we've got a rugby culture that's very strong. So I don't know if people will take to that as much as they might do elsewhere.
It's probably more lucrative doing the rugby than the athletics.
Yeah,
your rights are very
Sorry,
yeah, sorry, I was just wondering whether you could just have a quick word on the kind of overview of the tactical kind of setup, because I was reading an article the other day where it was comparing Sevens for the past, where it was kind of go side to side and the gaps will open up, and now it's changed to triangles and things like that. I was just wondering whether you could just give us a little overview on what's, without giving away anything obviously, but on the general Sevens tactics and what kind of, in particular, young players should focus on trying to improve, and what we should be looking at coaching, like kind of under 12s to 16s.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first thing to say on that is that a lot of teams will have very different tactics. So Scotland, for example, still play quite a traditional game where they'll spread it to the wing, pull out, spread it to the other wing. They're not that good at it. But that's no, I'm Scottish. They're one of the only teams that's below us at the moment, so I've got to make the most of it. But yeah, I mean, they do it, and that's what they think works for them. And a lot of it is about playing to your strengths. So we talk about what do you tell young players? Well, whenever we get a new player into to train with the squad, perhaps a student like I was when I went up and trained, all they tell you is just do what you're good at and stick to your strengths. Don't try and do something different. I mean, we get big guys coming up who perhaps aren't quite there with the running, aren't up to the same fitness levels because they're not used to it. But as a coach, you don't want to see them trying to do something that they're not used to. You want to see them carrying. If you've got a big guy in the team who can suck in 3 or 4 defenders or 3 defenders, then that creates space for other players elsewhere. Now, in terms of our tactics as an England team, I mentioned briefly earlier, we try and avoid rucks. We like to play an open, sort of keep out of contact. We've got an emphasis on getting over the gain line and going forward, but rather than taking a break down there, rather offload or go down and offload off the floor is a tactic we're trying to use. Because when you're stretching teams, which is another word that often comes up, stretching teams, that creates the space elsewhere for the quick guys, of which we've got quite a few in the squad at the moment. So the likes of Dan Norton and Marcus Watson. If you can give those guys 10 metres and a one-on-one, chances are they'll probably beat them. So that's the thinking behind our playing philosophy. I don't know if that's clear. Or
Just a quick follow-up. And on the video there, I noticed, and I've watched a few 7's, and a lot of the teams now seem to be kind of pulling the ball back rather than running onto the ball like you traditionally coach a player to do. The ball seems to be coming back to give them space to actually get a run up on their opposite number, as it were. Is that something that's deliberate, or is that just a accident?
Yeah, well, ideally, what we're looking to do is get your first receiver to play relatively flat, to fix the guards and the first defender. And then if he's then pulling it back to someone who's coming onto the ball, that's fine if he's got that depth, as long as he's coming onto it. I mean, if you're pulling it back to a static player, obviously defeats the object, but the advantage of pulling it back to someone who's already in transit is that then it's much harder for the defender to cover them, because they're moving in space. Any change of direction are a lot harder to cover, rather than playing flat on the gain line, because you're unlikely to outnumber people. If the defence is, or as most defences do these days, they number up quite well. So you're not trying to create an overlap playing flat on the gain line. You're trying to create either an overchase where defenders have gone past you so you can step inside them, or an outside break where you're quicker than the opposite man. So you're looking to create that's the space rather than kind of clear overlaps, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you.
Just a question on the complete opposite to our gentleman's question about attack. What do you think is the best ploy in defence in terms of having a sweeper or not?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to how comfortable you are in the front line. So if you're more comfortable having a sweeper, then it's probably an advantage, because you're more likely to defend harder, essentially. But obviously, technically, if you've got 7 players in your front defensive line, then you should be able to press because you know you've got numbers up, rather than having to cover an extra man somewhere. But I think it leaves you too vulnerable to the kick often. I mean, it's something that we look.
What do you think England should do?
Well, in the last couple of tournaments, we've used a 6 and a 1, but we don't always. So
you actually change during a game as well. You'll change at half time the system.
Yes, I mean, if we start with a system, we usually stick with it, I think. But obviously, if it's not working, or if there needs to be a change made, then we will. Because the alternative is you kind of use a pendulum system with both your wingers, essentially. What would be your wingers? which is a little bit, it requires more communication, it's a little bit harder to perhaps develop, perhaps with younger players maybe. But the reason that we've actually brought a sweeper back is for so you can be more offensive in your D. So if there's a half line break or something, or so once the tackle's been made in the front line, the sweeper can then come in as the second man, because he's in a very good position to make decisions about when he enters the breakdown. So that's actually the main reason, rather than covering kicks or anything like that. It's the fact that you can get turnovers because he's coming in. The referee can see it very clearly. He's coming in from an onside position. He's completely clear of the tackle, and he's on the ball. So.
Just sorry, one other question, but related to refereeing. I know you touched on the fact that you analyse trends in referees, but would you go as far as actually sitting down before a tournament and saying, oh, we're going to be having these referees, we're going to be playing in this way?
You must have missed it when we had this question before, Rob, but basically the answer is, yeah, we do analyse referees as well.
I know you analyse them, but do you sit down, do the players actually get that much information?
Yeah, so the coaches will, and the analysts will come up with points that they'll then deliver to us about certain trends that we can exploit in the refereeing.
Now we're getting questions asked for the second time. I think it could be a good time to sort of round up.
Can I just
One last question for our President.
Do you sometimes feel that you get penalised at the breakdown, particularly, I know you have referees, emerging nations and what have you, for actually being perfectly legal?
Be honest.
What is legal?
Well, yeah. I mean, I try to stay clear of the breakdown. It's a serious answer question. I think it happens both ways. I think you'll get away with some, as in all aspects of the game. I think sometimes you get away with it, sometimes you don't. I think it's getting harder to get away with it in some respects. I mean, I'll give you an example. In Dubai, the referees had a meeting 2 days before the tournament with the organisers and said they weren't going to allow you to seal anymore. If you're attacking, you're not allowed to seal on the guy on the floor, which was actually, if they'd stuck to it, they said they were going to stick to it 100%, which they didn't. But if they had done, that was a huge change, because you're then incredibly vulnerable to a counter-up. So I assume what they're trying to do there is make the ball more contestable at the breakdown. I mean, they didn't really stick to it, so it didn't happen. But perhaps that's a sign of where they're trying to go to, make it more accessible to the defending players.
You know, I've sometimes watched the tournaments, and the referees, I think, there's huge contrast between one referee and another. And I sometimes think that the referees actually over-referee that breakdown. I can see the defending team sometimes being penalised for what to me looks perfectly legal.
Well, I also think it's made very difficult for referees when they're having these changes 2 days out of the tournament, and there's huge pressure on it, and they're very exposed there because everyone can see it. And I think they could simplify things. I think that would be beneficial. But yeah. Well, if that's all the questions, thanks very much for having me. And it's really nice to come back and where it all started, and it was. I really generally never thought that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, and it's an absolute pleasure to come and be able to talk to you about it, because it's something that I love doing and I'm very privileged to do. So it's nice to sort of share some of it with you.
That was just really interesting. It's excellent. I mean, we're referees, but we're big rugby fans as well. And we really appreciate you coming on talking to us. And you're someone we know as well. And you're a local lad. I know you're an athlete.
I'm injured, so
thank you for coming along. President of East Grinstead to organise a lovely spread for us this evening.
Thank you, Mark.
Next meeting is Pulborough in a month's time, and we've got Ed Turnhill, RFU, still works the RFU, he's going to be our speaker. So see you then, everybody.
Well done.
Thanks, Roger.